Well, the life of every African American is important, and there is no place for racism in this country. But there are organizations whose number one goal is to defund the police. And we know that that hurts minority communities more than anyone. And we have to stand with our men and women of law enforcement. And I will always do that. You know, that's a distraction from the fact that my opponent does not stand with police officers. He's endorsed by organizations whose number one goal is to defund the police. He's called police officers gangsters, thugs, bullies, a threat to our children. He's called for our prisons to be opened up and emptied out. He's called for the abolishment of the cash bail system. Look, he doesn't care about safety and security in any community, and I'm fighting to make sure that we have the resources to keep our communities safe and our police departments well-funded and well-trained.
Senator, thank you. Would you like to respond to
Sure,
particularly about opening up the jails?
Well, listen. First of all, the land of the free is the mass incarceration capital of the world. We warehouse 25% of the world's prisoners. And people on both sides of the aisle know that our current criminal justice system needs reform. And we saw that this summer, a multiracial coalition of conscience pouring out into American streets after the tragic deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and so many others. And what did Kelly Loeffler do? She used her enormous privilege and power as a United States Senator to pick a fight with the black women on her team who know what it's like to grow up in a community where you have to have two talks with your children, one about the birds and the bees and the other about what happens if you're pulled over by police officers. To acknowledge that is not to condemn police officers in general. I've worked with police across the years. I've been invited to speak at their memorial services when they have when they've lost their lives in the line of duty. And she says she is against racism and that racism has no place, but she welcomed the support of a QAnon conspiracy theorist, and she sat down with a white supremacist for an interview. I don't think she can explain that.
May I respond?
Well, let me give you a chance to respond to that, and then we'll have one last question before we get to closing statements, please.
Well, that's incredibly sad, these comments that he's made. I mean, first of all, there's not a racist bone in my body. I have worked to bring communities together my entire life. But this is really terrible coming from someone who has divided people continually. He's called on Americans to repent for their worship of whiteness. He's called Israel an apartheid state and said that we should end military assistance. He's compared Israelis defending themselves against Palestinians. He's compared them to birds of prey. And he's celebrated Jeremiah Wright, an anti-American, anti-Semite. That's divisive.